remember, it was under Donald Trump. We had 1.4% inflation. We were energy independent. We were a net exporter of energy. Our border was secure. And safety and security we had at home and abroad as we were respected as a country. And Donald Trump accomplished all of that while simultaneously dealing with conspiracy theories, one hoax after another, one lie after another, one phony investigation after another. Now, all of it undone by Joe Biden in 18 short months. Now, President Trump's successors are chronicled in a new book by former senior advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner. He joins us now. He's the author of the book. It's in bookstores all around the country and, of course, Amazon.com. Breaking History, a White House memoir. You know, the amazing thing, you're a part of history. Most people will never really truly understand what life is really like in that house and what goes on behind the scenes. There's no doubt about it that any objective observation of the Trump presidency, it was a consequential presidency. And we see after 18 months what can happen when you abandon the policies that your father-in-law instituted in this country. What was it about him? What did you see about him that made him that different?
So first of all, Sean, it's great to be with you. It was a great honor to serve, and President Trump took the responsibility very seriously to fight for the American people and keep his promises. You were speaking earlier about all of the different accomplishments he was able to have economically. Those weren't an accident. It's been awful to watch the inflation that's happened, the rising gas prices. But all of that happened under the guise of all the investigations and attacks. And I write extensively in the book. It really is, everyone who's read it has said that it's a very fast-paced read. And that's because I weave together all of the efforts to try to push forward on the different policies while simultaneously dealing with all these false investigations that we had to fend off, because even though they were based on crazy accusations from the beginning, whether it was the Russia hoax or trying to, get Trump or impeach him for trying to investigate corruption in Ukraine, they were serious accusations and we had to take it. And, one story I tell in the book, too, is how President Trump negotiated a deal between Saudi Arabia and Russia in order to save our oil and gas industry, which now the current administration has hampered, which could be bringing down the price of gas in this country very quickly if allowed to. And it was a really intense negotiation, but President Trump got along with people in the world. He got along with Vladimir Putin. He got along with President Xi. It didn't mean he didn't have tough discussions with them, but I really go through the way that he dealt with them, which is how he kept the world peaceful. All the critics who, again, were lying about the Trump administration for 4 years, they were saying that if Trump was elected, he would lead to World War III. But we had 6 peace deals during Trump's time, and the world was a very, very safe place. So we go through all that extensively in the book.
Well, let me ask you this then, because he did it while being investigated, 3 years on Trump-Russia collusion that never happened. He did it during an impeachment. All of this happened, and then COVID hit, and that threw the world upside down. How did he do it while simultaneously having to deal with all that stress that probably would have crushed a million other people?
Well, if you would ask him that, he would say, do I have a choice? He was elected. He had a big responsibility, and it was very, very hard. And we were very grateful. Again, I would, be at night, I'd turn on your show, and I would, see yourself, Greg Jared, Solomon, Sarah Carter, going off and basically saying all this stuff is debunked. And then I flip over to MSNBC, and I would see them saying, they're right on the heels. They're about to get these guys. And I'm saying, but we didn't do anything. And, you really had to just block that off and just focus on the different things that we wanted to do. And President Trump was very focused. One of the efforts that I worked on that I detail in the book was the efforts in the Middle East to try to bring peace between Israel and the Arab countries. And that's something that the conventional thinking was that it would never happen. But President Trump was an outsider. He brought a businessman's approach to Washington. Businessmen are results-driven, unlike politicians who generally want to just process. There are some great politicians, too. But I write about how an outsider without a lot of political experience and a team came in and were able to achieve results that the political career people were not able to achieve. And so the book really goes through that in detail.
All right, two-part question. One is speculation on your part. Maybe you do know something that we don't know. Do you think he's going to run? And when you factor in all that your family went through, and we're talking about Don Jr. and Eric and Laura and Ivanka and the whole family, when you factor all of that in, do you want him to? Would you want to go through that again? Well, it still continues for a lot of the family.
So first of all, I don't want to speak for him, and obviously he is very bothered by what he's seeing happen in the country. He did a great job keeping our economy strong, keeping our world safe, and really fighting for American industry. And I think that he knows that he could fix it very quickly, but it is a big toll. Again, he's constantly under siege. It was a big toll on the entire family, but I think that the way we all viewed it is that the cost of service and all of the attacks and was very small relative to the impact that President Trump and his administration were able to make on so many people and their families. You know, one thing we worked on that you were very supportive was our criminal justice reform, where we were helping people who'd made mistakes in their lives re-enter society with training and job skills so that they don't commit crimes in the future. All those people were given a new lease on life. All the pardons, the Alice Marie Johnsons that President Trump were able to help give second chances to. That was incredible work, which, you know, when you think about that, it really, you know, puts all of the pain and stuff in context. And so for me, writing the book, I always like to look forwards, not backwards, but it really was a reminder of that brutal first year when we had a lot of different people trying to find their way in the White House. Again, we were being accused of colluding with Russia, which was a crazy notion. I mean, I would look at it and say, you know, most days I couldn't collude on the campaign with Donald, and we couldn't collude with our field office in Iowa, yet they were saying we pulled off this whole elaborate scheme. But the same people who are pushing that false narrative are the same people who are continuously attacking President Trump and a lot of the Republican Party, who are fighting just to, you know, fight for the middle class in order to give them jobs and give them opportunity and to keep our country safe.
It's called Breaking History, bookstores everywhere, Amazon.com. If you want a signed copy, JaredKushnerBooks.com. Jared, appreciate you being with us, and I learned a lot, and I thought I knew a lot about what was going on, and there was a lot I didn't know that was going on. Thanks for being with us. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.